Pittsburgh Steeler fans, good evening and welcome to another and actually final edition of the Beck In Black podcast. That's right, we're switching over next week because it's the start of the season and Wednesday nights turns to Know Your Enemy. I'm super excited for that, but we got one more post-season type show for all of you this evening, and if you're listening on the podcast platform, whenever that may be that you are in fact listening. Before we even get underway and breaking down our crucial first quarter of the Pittsburgh Steelers and their first four opponents of the season, I just want to mention that the BTSC Survivor League is back for another year, and you could win a Marquise Pouncey signed football, and you'll be competing against us, the BTSC staff, and as well as other listeners and readers of the website. So if you haven't gotten that on, gotten in on that already, make sure to head over to behindthesteelcurtain.com. Details for that are up there. They're also plastered all over our social media pages. So if you haven't joined that, make sure you do. It's always fun to play against you all in the Survivor League. Now, Jeffrey, sitting with me here tonight, how are you doing, sir?
Doing good.
Perfect. As always, doing great on the show. First matchup, the Steelers, we see them play this year, is against the New York Giants. Super early thoughts right now. I know we're just under a week or 2 weeks away at this point, but how are you feeling about that game?
You got to feel good about that game. You look at the Giants; they're not that great of a team. They weren't a great team last year. Daniel Jones isn't a bad quarterback. You know, I think he's going to get improved, but if the defense can replicate what they were doing last year, they should be able to give him trouble. I don't think that's going to be too much of a challenge. Their defense also isn't a big strength. There's a few interesting matchups, though. There's a few interesting things for week one that are in there.
Right now, of course, you mentioned Daniel Jones. I know how he's kind of started his career so far, but obviously the Giants had a lot of faith in this guy, taking him so high. Do you think he has potential to be a future franchise quarterback, or is he a stopgap type player?
I think he's going to be fine. Looking statistically at the season, when I was looking at our own Steeler players, and I was looking at Devlin Hodges and Mason Rudolph, when Devlin Hodges was playing well, his efficiency numbers were a lot like Daniel Jones. They were very similar players. They both convert a high rate of third and like mid-range and short conversions. They do a lot of short passes. They're very good in the short game, and they have decent efficiency in the few long shots they take. It's like he's basically a NFL starter caliber version of Devlin Hodges. So I actually like him. I think he's a pretty good quarterback, and I think the New York Giants have the right team around him, where his offense is really heavily built with the running back position and the tight end position. I think that's a good build for that. Like, not really making him make tough throws, setting him up for success with the offense around him.
Right now, of course, this year he's a brand new head coach in Joe Judge. He's only been as high as a special teams coordinator in the NFL so far. Of course, under that Patriot system, and we've heard a ton about how he's kind of taking a militaristic approach to running this team. Do you think, or what do you think he necessarily brings to this franchise that's different?
I think he brings that Patriot cockiness. We're going to see if that translates. It hasn't a lot of places, but then we saw Mike Vrabel. You know what he's been able to do in Tennessee with a similar kind of we're gonna do a bit of the Patriot system. We're gonna kind of do it a little, his own way. He put his own stamp on it. We're gonna see how Joe Judge does with that. They've talked about, they're doing a lot of Patriot-esque training camp things. The slip and slide fumble drill is apparently a big deal, where they put a ball on a slip and slide and have people try and get it. Like stuff like that. Some wacky things, but he's apparently very energetic, and it's been a very intense camp. So we could see a bump just from that. We could see a bump just from the energy and the toughness in camp, especially early in the season. I always remember 2007 when Mike Tomlin took over the team, and he ran one of the toughest camps they had seen in a long time. And the Steelers stormed out of the gate. And then by the end of the season, the team was visibly spent. Like they were in mid-season form week 1, and then the season just was too long for them to keep it going. So I think we could see a threat like that where, week 1 is a week you don't really want to catch this team. But also, if you look at their roster, I don't think that's a problem. They've got a lot of turnover. They've got a lot of young players, and they've got some weaknesses at key spots that we can really exploit.
Right now you do mention that weak roster. The first thing that pops to my mind is how the Steelers have struggled against lesser opponents in the Mike Tomlin era. Is this a trap game?
It could be. Looking at it, the big questions start with Ben Roethlisberger, and his first game after a long time being off is how much is he going to have? Not how much is he going to have? How ready is he, for the season in season form? He's had padded practices, but they haven't hit him. They aren't even touching him. They gently tap him on the shoulder. Like, you hurt Ben Roethlisberger, the season's done. They're not taking chances with him. He goes to New York. That's a different story. That's live defense. They're going for him. There's always a little bit of a reacclimation period. Always. And for Ben, it's been a year. It's been almost an entire year since he has played football. We'll see. I think the Steelers are going to really have to lean on their defense. Possibly if the offense starts off slow, if Ben starts off slow, we could see the Steelers have to lean on that defense.
Right. Now, I suppose if there is any chance of the Steelers falling in this one, there'd be a pretty big effort from one Mr. Saquon Barkley, who's obviously a super special talent, a Penn State alum. So people in the area know all about this guy and what he can do.
Yeah.
Can he completely take this game over and bring a W back home to New York with him?
I don't think so. The reason I say that is because the Steelers have that speed. Devin Bush, Terrell Edmonds, Minkah Fitzpatrick, those 3 guys are going to get to the ball. And there's going to be a big focus on this team that if you see the ball go to Saquon Barkley, get there. Get there now. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. Find a way to get there, because Saquon Barkley can break any solo tackle you have out there. He can juke people. You're going to have numbers. You're going to need one person grab a hold of him and the second person to help bring him down. So I think we can stop him from dominating the game. I don't think we're going to be able to shut him down, but I don't see a huge game from Saquon Barkley. I do think he provides a good test, especially with Evan Engram. One of the key matchups I have earmarked here is the Steelers linebackers, with Mark Barron gone, with Ulysses Gilbert and Marcus Allen kind of trying to fill that role maybe, and the Steelers wanting to play Vince Williams more. You're playing a team where, Saquon Barkley is Saquon Barkley, and he had 96 receptions. His crazy number. He's a great pass catcher. He brings a lot of athleticism, and Evan Engram is a guy who lines up in the slot. He's fast. That's the matchups where Mark Barron was actually valuable, was on when tight ends went out into the slot. His value went up, and we don't have him. And there's going to be a big question: how do we cover those 2 guys? Because you don't want Vince Williams in man coverage on either of those guys. Neither of them do you want to see Vince Williams trying to handle. So it's going to be an interesting test in that regard for both of them.
Now, speaking of coverage on the Giants side, they got bit by the injury bug a little bit.
Yes.
Now you got Mr. Logan Ryan signing to the franchise. Does he change this game, or is it too soon for him coming in right away?
Well, I was looking that up, and there's a lot of there's delays for him even being able to practice with the team. He has to clear COVID protocols. There's a question if they're going to even want to play him week 1. How much is he going to, he can't be around the players. He can't go through walkthroughs, even nothing. He's got to clear COVID. So there's issues there. I don't know if he'll play. And if he doesn't, that'll be a big benefit for the Steelers, because he's a physical, big presence in the slot. And he's a guy, the kind of player you want against the Steelers, where you're going to see James Washington and Juju Smith-Schuster in the slot. If they don't have him in week 1, or if he is struggling, not knowing the defense very well, it could be good. It could be a good thing for the Steelers.
Right now, I want to take it in the live chat here for the House of Positivity. Wes, I'm not calling you out, but they're a funny stretch here that I want to point out. Wes asked, do the Giants have any actual wide receivers? Then proceeds to say Mark Barron was never valuable. And finally, Logan Ryan isn't that good. House of Positivity, Wes. I love it. But I do pose the question back at the top here. Do the Giants have any actual wide receivers? Of course, Golden Tate, I believe, is injured right now.
He's the day-to-day. Sterling Shepard was good. He's kind of old now. They don't really have much. They really should not be as much of a threat at wide receiver.
There you go. Now, another position they're super thin at is offensive tackle, where it's filled with young guys. Is this a game that we should expect T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree to absolutely go off here?
That's a big thing I found there is for a matchup for this game is those tackles versus T.J. and Bud. That could be ugly. It could, like, these guys are in a contest now, trying to get going. Anthony Thomas is going to start at left tackle. He was their first round pick. He's a good player. But early on in camp, one of their outside linebackers, it wasn't even Marcus Golden. It was the other guy who was like 8.5 sacks in 2 years. Bull rushed him and knocked him straight on his butt. And he's improved since then. But I'm very interested to see him. He's going to be a left tackle, so he's going to be going against Bud Dupree. I want to see Bud Dupree give him a good Bud Dupree bull rush, because one of the things Bud Dupree's always been able to do is take an offensive lineman and just drive him backwards. It's just, before last year, he didn't do much with it after that. Last year, he started actually getting off those blocks after he drove them back and making plays. And TJ Watt versus a right tackle competition, where some of the guys in competition for right tackle are also in competition to start at center. Like, yeah, that's not a good place to be. You don't like they've got, I believe they're like, I was looking at some of the competitions. They've got a couple guys that are competing for both starting center and right tackle. Like, one of them's going to be like, do you want to face Cam Hayward or do you want to face TJ Watt? It's a little different game. And seeing them just trying to split those carries and see who's the best where, it doesn't bode well for them in that game. As good as TJ Watt is, Bud Dupree fired up for a contract season. That's going to be a big part of this game is how they do.
Right. I think Danny Dimes will be running around for his life in this one. Do you got any more key matchups for me?
I've got, of course, Daniel Jones versus our safeties, Minka Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmonds. Did a lot of disguise work last year, worked with Hayden and Nelson. They were doing a lot of that, and they've been talking it up this season. They're going to try and do even more. So that's a big one, how he handles that. The other one is they rebuilt their linebacker group. Their linebacker group is rebuilt, and if we are using our running backs more interestingly, and with Eric Ebron at tight end, that's going to be a good place to see, can we get something going there week 1 against a rebuilt linebacker group. And the other factors is just, inside the team. How much rust does Ben Roethlisberger need to shake off? And what kind of connection does he have with his receivers, in an actual live game? Because the only one he's thrown more than a handful of passes to is Juju Smith-Schuster.
Right. Now, before I ask you a winner or loser in this game here, George Teston asked, how is the Giant defense? Can this Steelers offense that's super young and relying on a patch back together Ben Roethlisberger move the ball on this team?
Their defense is not so great. They've got Jabril Peppers at strong safety. He's fast. He can cover a lot of space. He's kind of a lesser version of Terrell Edmonds, in my opinion, who can also, he can do kick returns, but as a strong safety, he's a little bit less than Terrell Edmonds. He's one of their better secondary guys. So yeah, I think they can really do something in this game. Right now,
straight up asking you to pick a winner in this one. who's taking home the W in week 1?
I think the Steelers get it, and I don't think it's like a blowout, but I don't think the game's really at risk either. I think they have a pretty solid command of the game the whole time.
Right now, I'm also leaning the way you are saying here with the Steelers' victory. I think I'd be a little surprised if they didn't come out with the W in week 1. It just seems like there's so much going in Pittsburgh's favor. Ben coming back. Honestly, anytime there's been any injury concerns on offense, especially with Ben playing quarterback, or if there's an injury to Ben himself, usually the first thing he does on that first play is load it up and launch it deep. I vividly remember that playoff game. I think it was against Denver after he hurt his shoulder against Cincinnati a few years back now.
Yeah.
First play of the game, everyone thought his shoulder was shot and he could only throw the ball 20 yards at a time here. First play of the game, he steps back and launches it deep. No Antonio Brown in that one either. And I think he sent that sucker 50 yards down the field. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the opening play of the game. I think this could be a big one, almost like a revenge game for Ben Roethlisberger. There is one huge factor before we move on to what I believe Denver in week 2 here. But if we're going to learn a whole lot about the Steelers team, specifically Ben Roethlisberger in week 1, if he comes out and has a dud, are we sounding the alarms?
Probably not. I think this offense can work even if he's not physically as good as he has been in the past. I think it can still work mostly based off his intelligence, his experience, and his veteran leadership is going to be really valuable to this team. And with that defense, if the defense can really be the star of the team again, then we don't actually need Ben Roethlisberger to be, 2017, 2016, 15 Ben Roethlisberger. He can be somewhat less than that, and we can still be good. We had one question in the chat that stood out to me. I don't know how to put it up, but which Steeler wide receiver has the best chance to have a big game against the Giants? Week 1, I'm going Juju Smith-Schuster. There it is. I'm going Juju Smith-Schuster. If you watched week 1 last season, Ben went to Juju a lot. I expect Ben to go back to Juju. That's the guy he has the most experience with. That's going to be kind of his comfort blanket to start the game going. I expect Juju to have a lot of targets and receptions against the Giants.
Perfect. Is there anything else you want to touch on that week 1 game?
No, I'm good.
All righty. So moving on to Denver. I think one of the more important things with this team, honestly, I think this team had a great offseason. Do you think Denver is the 2019 Cleveland Browns offseason champions, where the 2020 offseason belonged to them?
I will not compare them with the Browns because I think they actually did a really good job in the offseason of putting pieces together that actually work together. So I won't compare it with the Browns, but yeah, they had a phenomenal offseason.
Right, and one of those moves they made was bring in Melvin Gordon to pair with Phillip Lindsay. My question to you, are they the best running back duo in football today?
Well, that's a good question. They have the potential to be up there. Both of them can run in a run-heavy offense, but also both of them can catch the ball. Like they're not going to line up in the slot and be an Alvin Kamara type guy, but they can catch the ball in the backfield. So they give them a lot of versatility, and if you're going to run the ball a lot, you need 2 backs, even if I don't think they're going to run the ball a lot in Denver.
Right now, with that backfield, there's Mr. Drew Lock returning for a sophomore season. Of course, he was acquired with one of the picks that the Steelers sent to Denver in that Devin Bush deal. He showed a lot of promise at the very beginning of his rookie campaign when he came in. I believe it was right around week 10 when he took the reins. Is he poised for a breakout sophomore season?
There's a big worry about him because he shows all the talent to really, really have a good second year. His problem in his first year is he seemed very timid. They have Cortland Sutton and they have that kind of deep threat thing going on there. He didn't seem to really connect with that. He was throwing short a lot. He wasn't a good deep ball passer. He had a lot of what seemed to me to be hesitation. But that's also he's still a rookie, you know. That's a thing. He's a young guy. That can take some time to come in, for a quarterback to come into their own and kind of get that confidence and get that trust with their wide receivers. And with the weapons they added, you know, I know we haven't said that yet, but the weapons they added, I think we could see if he gets that confidence, if he gets in a rhythm, he could really, really have a good second season.
Right. And, you know, those weapons that you're talking about, of course, Cortland Sutton was already there a year ago. They draft KJ Hamler. They draft Jerry Jeudy. My question is, with that receiving core, their top three, would you rather have that top three or the Steelers' top three?
That's a good question, too.
You're surprised.
No, you're getting me with ones I haven't thought of. Wow, that would be tough. Right now, I'd probably go with the Steelers. Because we got 4. I like having 4. Because then if one doesn't work out, you still got 3 more. So I'll take the Steelers. But, man, that's a good young group. I'm a big fan of Kevin Hamler, especially if he's in a situation where he's not the number 1 target, and he's going to be the number 3. You know, you've got Jerry Jeudy, who from camp, there's veteran players saying he's the best, you know, route runner they faced in their career as a rookie. Which we kind of knew that was his thing in college. He looked like a veteran NFL route runner in college. So he has that aspect. They're going to be able, because Hamler can play outside or inside, they're going to be able to do some matchup things. You're going to be able to see a big, you know, technically sound wide receiver in the slot, or you're going to be able to see, you know, Kevin Hamler in there just speed, you know, water bugging it all over the place. That's a good receiving core. They've got a deep tight end room with our old friend Nick Vannett as their number 2. To kind of he's solid, you know. He's just a stable kind of presence, and that'll help Noah Fant. But he's there.
Jake Butt's still there though, is he not? Is he?
Yeah. Which is surprising to me because so far in their career, Zach Gentry's the better NFL tight end between the two. Jake Butt has done like absolutely nothing in 3 years. Like in his time in the NFL, he's done nothing. And Zach Gentry's already, you know, at least seen the field and caught a pass.
1 reception. Hey, that's more than either you or I, unfortunately. But I digress. This Broncos roster, man, like just looking at it, whoa, they really are loaded. And honestly, when I was scrolling through their team, I'm like, these guys could be one of those teams that are kind of like a dark horse Super Bowl team. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I don't think they're a Super Bowl team. I think they're kind of a spoiler. I can't wait to see them face Kansas City. Like, I can't wait for that matchup. Of course, they brought in Mark Barron, who will be helpful again in those. Apologies to Wes Hickok, who said Mark Barron is terrible, but he is specifically good in one exact area, and that is when you can put him on a tight end who is not lined up in line and say, just cover that guy. He's good at it. The reason we brought him in is what Travis Kelce did to us in 2018 when he just absolutely destroyed the Steelers single-handedly. They brought him in. He could be a factor there. He also could be a factor in week 2 because as bad as he was, his 3 best games were in LA against the Rams and both Cincinnati games where Cincinnati's coach brought the Rams offense and kept the same terminology. Like he knew that offense. And the 3 games where he knew the offense that the other team was running were his 3 best games. And he was actually pretty good.
Right. Now, before we get into some game predictions here, one of the oldest guys still on their roster, a super young roster, might I add, one Mr. Von Miller. Is he still that guy? Is he still one of the best pass rushers in football, or is it his day in the sun kind of come and gone?
I think so. He hasn't had the defensive line that he had before. He hasn't had the secondary he had when he was, when he was really, really tearing it up. I mean, you can imagine if Hayward and Tua were gone, and Minka wasn't in the secondary, and they were getting thrown all the time. TJ Watt isn't quite the player he is either. Von Miller has slowed down a bit. He's not quite the player he was, but he according to their camp, I mean, it's true every training camp. Everyone's always in the best shape of their life, but that's what we're hearing about Von Miller is he's in great shape and he is playing kind of on fire right now in camp. He is really pushing. The good news for the Steelers is Bradley Chubb is on a snap count and expects to start they expect him to start the season on a snap count, which will be nice considering he'll be going against whoever wins our right tackle battle, and facing Bradley Chubb second week wouldn't be the best situation for those guys, but having him on a snap count will limit that exposure.
Right. Now, before we move on a little bit further here, do you have any key matchups you want to bring up?
Yeah. Their safeties in Denver are incredible. Justin Simmons and what's the other guy's name? Kareem Jackson. Simmons and Jackson are a phenomenal pair of safeties. They are right up there with Minka and Terrell, maybe better if you rank the balance between them. Minka's probably the best of those four safeties, but the other those two guys play together really well, and they're both really good. They added AJ Bouye, but their cornerbacks are still kind of suspect, but they have great safeties backing them up. My big question will be our depth at our defense versus all that speed and talent at wide receiver, that young speed. How we match up with Drew Lock. Again, their tackles are like the weak spot of their line. This is another game where you could see like they could come in, look good, but Bud Dupree and TJ Watt could solve the game for them. Like they can just decide your offense for you. Like you can't, what are you going to do? You can't throw deep if you can't stand in the pocket for 2 seconds without getting your head ripped off. Or, in TJ's case, your ball's punched. The ball, football, meaning the football, right?
Well. In
one of the
TJ's
two.
case, one of the
and
three.
Their tight ends. They have some young, good tight ends. They have Noah Fant is athletic. Another team where you're gonna see some challenge posted to the linebackers in coverage.
Awesome. Now, getting straight into it, who's winning week 2? Are the Steelers starting 2-0?
That's our first trap game. If this game was in Denver, I would be picking this to be a loss. Again, Ben isn't even great in Denver. Farther out west, you get the worst Ben Roethlisberger tends to play, especially if the team's not considered great and it's not a primetime national matchup.
Especially if I'm in attendance.
But this is in Heinz Field, and I think that gives us a bonus. I think that'll be the difference in the game. I think the Steelers win a game, and I think the Denver Broncos put a little fear into the hearts of Steelers Nation, making it a tough one.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like this one might be a little further apart if it was a true home field advantage. I do believe the first 2 games of the season, as of right now, will be fanless at Heinz Field. So it will be very interesting. Of course, we've seen the NBA and NHL in the playoffs right now, and home field, home court, home ice really doesn't seem to be a factor whatsoever, even though they are being played at a neutral site. So there might be something a little extra that teams are moving around, kind of like Major League Baseball. So that's something to watch out there. Before we flip over to part 2, I will say I also agree that the Steelers are going to start this year off 2-0. I think this comes down to getting into Drew Lock's head, getting after the young quarterback, not making life fun for him, and forcing a bunch of turnovers. It might be his first game where he actually kind of looks not the part of a number 1 quarterback. So I wouldn't be too surprised if the Steelers defense was absolutely completely tearing it up 2 weeks into the season. That being said, you are listening to Behind the Steel Curtains Beck in Black podcast. This has been part 1, breaking down the first 4 games of the 2020 season. I am your deputy editor, Michael Beck, joined as always by Jeffrey Benedict. Here for part 2, we are breaking down the next 2 games of the Steelers' opening 4 on the schedule. Of course, we already broke down Denver and New York. Now we're moving into Houston and then wrapping things up with Tennessee. a little bit of AFC South action at the very end here. Before we even get into that, again, I want to mention that the BTSC Survivor League is back for another season. If you guys are interested in competing in Survivor League fantasy football, you can compete against us, the BTSC staff, as well as your compadres in the live chat and the readers of our website. Head over to behindthesteelcurtain.com whenever we're done here to get into the Survivor League and have a chance to win a signed Marquise Pouncey football. Jeffrey, back to you. The Houston Texans, are they the best team that the Steelers will face in their first 4 games?
I actually think they might be the worst.
Ooh, okay.
I am not a fan of what Houston has going on. Their offseason wasn't the best. Of course, the trade, when you trade one of the best players in the NFL for
Brandon Cooks?
No, Hopkins.
Yeah. Oh, that guy, yeah.
They just slipped my mind. Wow. Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins gone. Like, what are you doing? Watson is a phenomenal quarterback. But other than that, like, what do they have? They got J.J. Watt and Deshaun Watson and pieces.
They do. Like, you look at the receiving core. For me, it's one of the spots I looked at, breaking this down, and really thought, wow, those are some names. If it was 2016,
yeah,
if they could return to that form, wow, they'd be outstanding. But I'm not really expecting that. I do want to open this up in the live chat. Nico Suave, I believe. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but he says Bill O'Brien single-handedly trying to ruin that team. Do you think that is the case? Is there a method to this guy's madness, or is he just absolutely lost it?
It's an interesting roster he's building. He's got a bunch of deep threats, and then his running backs are 2 pass catchers. Like David Johnson, okay, yeah, and Duke Johnson, you're like, well, that's the same. This is the same guy. You got 2 of the same guy, and I don't know. Maybe that's his game plan. Maybe his plan is, stretch the field and throw underneath the running backs, and somehow that's going to work in the NFL.
Well, maybe he knows something that everyone else doesn't. But speaking of David Johnson, of course, that wrist injury really held him back. Kenyon Drake took his job in Arizona. Does he still have it? Is he far and gone? Is he like DeMarco Murray was in Philadelphia at this point?
I think he's still a very valuable receiver. I don't think he's going to be a steady runner like he was early on in Arizona. That didn't last long. He couldn't physically hold up on that, but he is still a good receiver, as Terrell Edmonds and Joe Hayden learned in Arizona last year when he put a touchdown over Terrell Edmonds. He can still do it. I think Duke Johnson can still do it. They're gonna be receivers. The question is, what can they do as runners? And I don't see that working very well with those 2 guys as your running backs. I don't see the running game being anything to really, hang your hat on. And with the receivers they have, that's going to be rough.
Right now, with this team, they're obviously their best player and someone who is an MVP candidate, one Deshaun Watson. He might struggle to bring home an award like that with the roster around him. But how do the Steelers stop a quarterback of his caliber?
I think that's he plays right into the strengths of the Steelers defense. His mobility is kind of negated. The Steelers with Bud Dupree and TJ Watt and the guys inside, they do a great job of getting pressure while maintaining a hold on while maintaining pocket integrity and keeping the quarterback kind of trapped. So they kind of trap you in there and you just have to face the pressure. And I think that plays into their favor. Watson's not the tallest guy either. So I think keeping him in the pocket and pressuring that pocket, making him uncomfortable in that pocket, and TJ Watt and Bud Dupree coming around the edge, that's the secret to facing Deshaun Watson, and that's what the Steelers do best.
Right. Now, with this game, really, it's the Watt Bowl. one of the tough things here, it will be in Pittsburgh, but it does fall under that classification of their first 2 games in Heinz Field. I know the Watt family's a little upset whether or not their family can be in attendance of that one because, of course, it is the first time all 3 Watt brothers have been on the field at the same time since they've been professional football players. Before college, I don't even know high school, even before that, just because JJ's a few years older than both Derek and TJ. I don't know if it's necessarily ever happened in a single game before, but of course this is a big one. Sorry to Derek on this question, but who's having the bigger game, JJ or TJ?
I'm going to go TJ. JJ is, when healthy, the better player. When he is fully healthy, but TJ has a team around him. Like JJ's their defense. JJ is the Houston Texans defense. I was actually on the SB Nation site for the Houston Texans, and they had an article about how when JJ Watt played last season, they were a mid-level pass defense, and when he did not play, they were one of the worst 3 pass defenses in the NFL. And that was it. Like, if he was he active for the game? If he's active, they're in the middle of the pack. If not, they're awful. So he has that level of talent still, but also he's all they have. He's really all they have. So you can put help his way. You can even double team him. You can scheme entirely to stop JJ Watt and know that the rest of that team isn't that much of a threat.
Right, and I was really looking at this defensive roster, and I couldn't help to think it's probably the worst of the first 4 defenses they play to kick the season off. Do you think it's the worst defense they're facing the entirety of this season?
It could be, especially if J.J. Watt gets hurt. If J.J. Watt goes down, this defense is, it's bad. Houston's going to be bad. So if J.J. Watt is there, they're all right. If he's not, then I would say, it's probably going to be one of the worst defenses they face all season.
Is there any noteworthy names on that defensive side that's not J.J. Watt?
No one stands. Even like Jonathan Joseph, you'd hear about him. He'd have some good games and he's gone. It's like anything they had is gone. It's just pieces. It's pieces, but there's no real core to the defense.
So if Ben Roethlisberger were to have one 400-yard game this season, would you say this game against the Houston Texans is the one he'd do it in?
It could be. If Deshaun Watson is like just determined to do his best and is playing well against us and is kind of, putting points on the board, then you could definitely see Ben Roethlisberger, the Steelers just be like, all right, Ben, open it up. Let's go. Especially, we could see that being his biggest game of the early season, just because week 1 on the road, I don't expect them to push Ben Roethlisberger too much. And then week 2, you get those safeties for Denver. This is the first game I would really expect to be a game where Ben could really go off.
Right. And you know what? I think this is the game. I think we'll see him really start to shake the rust off and really kind of open it up and look like more of a Ben Roethlisberger of old. Do you see any other key matchups in this game?
Just their deep threats. It'll be. I always love when you're facing 2 or 3 guys that can go deep on you. I don't think there's much left for Devontae Adams. I think that's their old guy they got.
Devontae Adams is Green Bay.
Green Bay, yeah. Who did they get? Randall Cobb.
Yeah.
I was thinking, who's the guy? They got Randall Cobb as Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Kenny Stills. They got a bunch of guys who are solid deep threats, and then those running backs underneath. So again, you're getting did I just switch teams there?
Nope.
No, I didn't.
You got them all.
You've got those deep threats, and you've got those linebackers, trying to cover those running backs. My key for the Steelers offense was don't suck. Just don't come into that game and play your worst game of the season. Just don't do that. And you've got this.
Well, if they do got this, then that would make them 3-0 to start that year by both of our accounts. Is that exactly what you're calling here?
I think that one is. I think Houston's gonna be ugly. I think that game's gonna be bad because I think you're gonna see TJ just go off. I think we're hearing a lot about TJ and how he looks significantly better than he did last year in camp. And as good as he was last year, he could be going off, and the chance to go face his brother and just put up a huge game would be bragging rights he would have for the rest of his life. He could always be like, "Hey, remember 2020? You know, how'd you do? I had 7 sacks that game. What'd you do? JJ had 7 sacks. Like, I could see TJ absolutely going off. I think we'd probably see a defensive touchdown in that game.
Ooh.
I am really predicting that to be a game where this defense goes off.
Mark the tape. Although I do kind of I tend to agree with you on this one. I feel like that's exactly what we're about to see, and I'm really excited for that. If TJ Watt can go off in the Watt Bowl, that would be what leads off every highlight reel across the country, across the continent, for at least the next week. So I'm excited for that one. One of the weird things though is, and I know they don't flex the early year, it's not one of those primetime matchups. And the Watt brothers, I know it from writing articles. If you include TJ Watt in the headline, it's doing about 10 times the amount of reads as just about any other player in this team. Yep. Why exactly did they get left off of the primetime schedule?
I don't know. I honestly think that's dumb.
Yeah,
like that's the Watt Bowl. Like, it's JJ versus TJ. And it is kind of, yeah, and also Derek. The Watt brothers and their brother Derek.
Yeah.
But I wish it was in prime time, because really I think we're going to see TJ have just an incredible game, and facing off against JJ in a primetime game and just going off and putting up insane stats is how you really start a defensive player of the year campaign. That's how you do it. You know, you get on primetime and that kind of a thing, and you just take your brother, who's won, 2 defensive player of the year? Three. And just be like, what? You know, I'm that much better than you now. It's my time.
Exactly. A lot of those individual player awards, I don't think it's one of those things that people really note as much, but a lot of those are won within the first 8 games of the season. And then if guys put on cruise control, they still usually have it locked up. I think that's kind of one of the things that happened with Stephon Gilmore, because I do think he trailed off as the year went a year ago, but his first 8 games were so great. That's what the voters were really kind of thinking on. They had their minds made up for that award from the Steelers bye week on, really. Yeah. And it was unfortunate for TJ, but that's just kind of how it goes. And he has to explode. And this is one that I think will get some national attention, regardless of it being in that primetime spot or not. Both of us picking the Titans to win, correct?
Wait, what'd you say?
Both of us are picking the Titans to win here?
We're moving on to the Titans?
Texans, same, right?
I don't think I'm picking the Texans to win this one.
Oh my goodness, the Steelers! Wow, English.
We're picking the Steelers to win week 3.
Yeah, there you go. You got it out for me. Thank you. Whew. Let's move on to the next game and pretend that never happened. But the Tennessee Titans are the Cinderella team of 2019. Teams are typically not the Cinderella for 2 years in a row, but could they potentially do it? Are they the spoiler again?
Well, they've changed over a few personnel, but they have very similar team to what they had last year. It's gonna be tough. You usually don't see a running back that dominant 2 years in a row very often. Derrick Henry could do it. If anyone can do it, he could. But you also don't see a quarterback have a season like Ryan Tannehill had 2 years in a row very often. That's more likely the one to regress towards the mean. The defense is still going to be solid, but they were good but not great last season. They were borderline top 10. So I think they're going to be good. They could slip into the wild card spot again, but they're going to be one of those teams. I think they're getting a little bit of hype because of what they were able to do in the postseason last year, knocking off the Ravens. But I think they're going to be in that same similar kind of spot again. Not quite as good.
Right now, The Titans stole that last playoff spot away from the Steelers right at the very end of the season. Is there any extra motivation on the Steelers' behalf in this one, going up against a team that effectively bounced them out of the playoffs a year ago?
I don't think that'll really register with them. It could, but they didn't face the Titans. That's not a team that they've actually gotten to face. I think they'll be fired up for the matchup just because that's their first big AFC opponent. I remember the Titans don't have a tough early schedule. I was looking at someone didn't have a tough early schedule, and I didn't actually mark it down. But they could. They are one of the favorite teams in the AFC. So it could be considered a big matchup, and I think the Steelers will show up for it.
Right now, one of the things with Derrick Henry, of course, he's been a beast. He made Earl Thomas look like an absolute fool until we learned he actually is a fool. But he's done a lot of great things, but some of his stats have been really inflated the last 2 years by having extremely gigantic rushing games late in the season. Last year, he had a 200-yard game. The year before, I think he followed up a 200-yard game with like a 180-yard game, something like that. Is he really that good? Of course, he started his career really slow. Or is he just a guy that is viewed so highly because he's had some really great games that have bumped him into that 1,000-yard category?
He's good. I think he's a really good running back. He's one of the better running backs in the NFL, but that's not, what it used to be. He's not an all-time great. He's gonna get his yards. He's gonna do well, but I do not expect him to be that kind of dominant runner. I think we're going to see a kind of a more down year. He also starts slow. Like he tends to start season slowly and then pick it up as the season goes on. Like you said, pull off a couple of really big games late to pad those rushing yards. So I think we could see him not have quite the start, that he had to finish to last year.
Now, Ryan Tannehill's another one of those guys that when it comes to Cinderella, he comes in, takes Marcus Mariota's job, and he looks really good and earns a giant contract for himself. Can we see a repeat of that again, or was that his height? Does it get any better than 2019 Ryan Tannehill?
I don't think it gets better, simply because that's hard to match. I mean, it's hard to match the kind of season he had. 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That's incredible. And his efficiency numbers. If you dig into his advanced metrics, he was one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL when before last season, he was one of the worst consistently. Like he kind of went from the bottom of the pile to the top of the pile in his deep balls. That has a lot to do with A.J. Brown, of course. A.J. Brown helped him improve a lot. But it also seems kind of due for regression. I think the schedule won't do him a whole lot of favors either. He is going to play some teams that are going to be strong against him as well. Taking away his deep passes, taking away stuff from A.J. Brown. I think the defenses he's going to face will be better.
Right. Now, speaking of A.J. Brown, this is a really big matchup, I'd say, in those second-year receivers. Of course, when it comes to this national media, a lot of the names getting all the hype out of the second-year guys, A.J. Brown, of course, being one, Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf. Deontay Johnson is not getting a whole lot of love here. Do you think A.J. Brown is hands down better than Deontay Johnson, or is Deontay just getting completely overlooked?
I actually think A.J. Brown is just better. A.J. Brown has the look of a legit superstar. And Deontay is going to be good. Don't get me wrong. And his ceiling is still really high. There's potential for him to be phenomenally good. But A.J. Brown could be like an next Terrell Owens type player. He has access to that kind of level of play. So he could turn into that kind of a guy. I think he is on another level compared to Deontay.
Wow, that is some high praise for A.J. Brown. I would have to agree. He's looked outstanding. I think he really is the cream of the 2019 receiver crop. The defensive side of this team, though, some huge losses. Jarrell Casey, Logan Ryan, who we mentioned earlier, the newest New York Giant. Now, are they going to be as good as they were defensively a year ago? They do have some big losses. Are they able to fill those shoes?
Largely, there are some question marks there. They are saying they have guys that can step up, and we'll see. It's one of those questions when guys look like they're going to step up. Who knows? They had players they lost that really stepped up under their system, and we'll see if they can just replace them like that. If it's more the system or if it's more the players. I'm a big Mike Vrabel fan, so I think Tennessee's defense is going to continue to be good. I think they will continue to be good, but they're not a top 3 defense. They're not in contention for that kind of category. You mentioned the loss of Ryan. I think that is a spot where they could be vulnerable, where Juju in the slot, where we go 3 wide receivers and we can kind of get some stuff going on them. But they're a good defense, they're a very good defense, not a great defense.
Right, and you mentioned Mike Vrabel. Where does he land on the list of these young head coach hierarchies?
I think he's one of the better ones. Honestly, of all the younger guys, I would put him. I'd put him in top 3.
Is he
he's in that category. He's right up there. He's going to be really good.
Would you say he's like the defensive Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay?
I think he's better head coach than they are. Those guys are they have their offense, and whatever else happens, that's their thing. Vrabel has that defense, but he's also, I think, a better head coach. He's got the right kind of head coach mentality. But he played for 2 really good head coach guys that let their coordinators work, knew what they were doing, had their own input, but also knew how to, also let people work and motivated the team.
One of the things I love watching Mike Vrabel coach is when he's when all his guys are in pads and he's in the drills with these guys in pads, just hitting them back or he's yelling at them to hit them harder. He is kind of crazy in that sense, but you know what? Seeing a coach that hands-on, it's got to be motivating for those guys.
Yeah, he reminds me of his 2 coaches. He has a bit of Belichick in him, and he also has a bit of Cowher. He has a bit of that Bill Cowher. I'm gonna jump my chin out, dive in the pile, and we're gonna win this thing.
Yeah,
and I love that. Mike Vrabel is one of probably my second favorite coach in the NFL right now, behind Tomlin.
Wow, glowing remarks. Now, I'm definitely an offensive guy, so I think I'd lean more to those West Coast guys myself, but I definitely see where you're coming from. What are we looking at for key matchups?
Key matchups, Devin Bush and Vince Williams facing off against Derrick Henry. One of the interesting things the Titans do, even though they don't really have high numbers for their receiving tight ends, is they put them in the slot. They move them out of they're not like an inline power team. Their tight ends go out and play in the slot. They like to go big and spread teams out anyways. And they'll put your tight end they'll put their tight ends in the slot and then run. They do really good at that. It makes it really hard to match up with them, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on the linebackers again. If the tight ends are out in the slot, do you put Vince Williams on them? Do you move Devin Bush out there into the slot and let Henry run, knowing Devin Bush has been pulled out of the box? Do you take Vince Williams out and put in a coverage guy, and then Derrick Henry's running on you, and have Vince Williams in the box? That's going to be a really interesting matchup, is what the Steelers again do with their linebackers. That's really, for me, the story for the Steelers defense in the first 4 weeks is we're playing a lot of teams that put their tight ends in the slot, move them around, and have running backs that either catch passes or are named Derrick Henry. So there's going to be a lot of pressure, a lot of stress on those linebackers, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Steelers work in the younger guys as well. The Marcus Allen and Ulysses Gilbert the third, and how much Vince Williams can carry the load when teams are going to attack him and try and get him in matchups where he has to defend an athletic, player. The other big matchup is that secondary versus Tannehill. It stood out to me looking at Tannehill's game log that he didn't play well. He faced Denver once early in the season, and he didn't play well against them. Teams with strong safeties may have an advantage on him. He beat up a lot of not so great defenses. And I think we could see our secondary versus Ryan Tannehill be a big storyline in this game to see, is he legit? Is he going to be able to be smart and efficient with the ball against the top secondary? Or are we going to be able to turn him into just a run team? And if we can turn the Titans into the only thing working on their offense is Derrick Henry, then all we need is Ben Roethlisberger to put up a few touchdowns and it's over.
Perfect. Now, Steelers are heading into this game 3-0, according to the two of us. Do they make it out 4-0? And I honestly couldn't tell you the last time they actually did start a year 4-0, but is that possible?
That is the Titans at home. I think this is, to me, our first loss. I could definitely see the Steelers winning it, but going 4-0, like as much as you can look at the team on paper and say, holy crap, this team could beat anyone on that in that schedule until maybe you split with the Baltimore Ravens. But in reality, Ben Roethlisberger is not going to start the season with 4 great games. There's going to be at least one game there where he doesn't play well. That's just Ben, and it could be the Titans. And if it is the Titans, then we're not winning that game. If you give the Titans, if they can get a lead, it's Derrick Henry all day, and you don't want that.
Right, and you know what? Maybe I'll be the House of Positivity guy and say the Steelers are escaping with the 4 perfect slate, 4-0 start to the season. But final question I pose to you before we get out of here: if the Steelers already go 4-0, or really, what is it going to take for this team to start this year a sterling 4-0 record?
It's going to take the defense being just as good as they were at the end of last season. That's the number one thing. When the Steelers had a defense that could keep the score tight when Ben Roethlisberger was playing poorly, he always came through at the end. Like he would not be playing well. The defense would keep the game tight, and then Ben Roethlisberger would get his act together, and the Steelers would win the game. Also, all of those trap games, all of those bad games where we lost to bad teams, they tend to coincide with Ben Roethlisberger not having a good game and also our defense not being very good. So if the defense is really good, then they can do it. They can absolutely do it. Another key factor would be they need somebody to show up on offense that is a little unexpected, I think. I think you need another player to show up. We know we have good running backs. We know Juju's going to put up yards. We know Deontay Johnson's going to do good. If James Washington, Chase Claypool, if Anthony McFarland, Eric Ebron is showing up and is really causing mismatches, then yeah, we can go 4-0 definitely. Awesome. Now, is there anything else you want to plug before we head out? I'm doing a series on the website right now, behindthesteelcurtain.com, where I'm covering each position group. I've been covering a new one each day. I did the offensive line, came out yesterday, on what would be Tuesday. Quarterbacks came out today. I had a whole spiel about Devlin Hodges. It got a lot of people fired up. And I'm putting out the running backs are coming out tomorrow. Just breaking down the positions, and also have links to some of the film room work that I've done and that KT Smith has done, and even Flip Fisher on quarterbacks. He's done a lot of quarterback film rooms. So just stuff that's on the site that's been interesting to me and insightful for what you can expect at those positions. Links to that, and also an overview of the position. Beautiful. As we sign out here, I again want to mention the Survivor League. You can compete against BTSC staff as well as your fellow readers and listeners. So make sure you get on that for your chance to win a Marquise Pouncey signed football. For Jeffrey Benedict, I'm Michael Beck, and you have been listening to Beck in Black. Next week, we are back at it with Know Your Enemy. So stay tuned for that. As always, it's great hanging out with you guys. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next week.